All right, welcome back to the F3 Q Source podcast. With me again, back by popular demand, Chuck Cline. Goose, great to have you back on the podcast.
Morning, Pet. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. It's good seeing you guys, and good talking to the listeners again.
Yeah, before we jump too much further, we got to share this story of what happened on Wednesday. So. Okay. All right, so I'm thinking about this chapter. We're in Q 1.8 Whetstone. It's a chapter on mentorship. Immediately, I thought about Goose. Goose last year at our Q Source table just told so many stories all year long of just great mentors that he's had, as well as mentoring other people. And I just knew he needed to be the guest. And so I'm standing in line getting coffee at Smooth Joe right before our Q Source conversation. I text them. I said, "Hey, what's the chance you'll come back on the podcast this week?" And then all of a sudden, like literally probably 30 seconds later, I get a call and it's Goose. And so I pick up. I'll let you tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, I was. So I'm up. Y'all are down in Wake Forest. I'm up here in Hampton Roads out at Mount Trashmore in Virginia Beach, and I literally was telling some of the guys there about the podcast that you've been running. And literally, I'm sitting there telling this story, and then you sent a text. You're like, "Hey," and it was just one of those serendipitous, like something really interesting, kind of creepy in life has happened, and that we were all on the same sheet of music, or there's kind of a higher power that's just sort of moving things around. But that it was just too eerie and too amazing to you can't ignore that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, we're meant to have this conversation. I think it'll be a blessing to those that listen, and I hope that it spurs them on to seek out this topic. So whetstone, for those who don't know, a whetstone is the blade, is a stone that a knife is sharpened on. Right, so the knife is sharpened against the whetstone to get its blade. And Dredd, the author of the Q Source material, says that a man, just like a knife, must be sharpened. It must be sharpened. And so we like knives need to be sharpened, and we need to be sharpened by other men. And those men can act as whetstones in our life. Clearly, situationally, we can be sharpened, but we need men in our life who are going to sharpen us. People who've been where we're trying to get to, who've been where we are. And I know this has been really impactful for you, Goose, but I'll just let you comment. Like, what role has mentorship played in you becoming the leader that you are today?
Ooh, it's obviously cliche to say it, but leaders aren't born, they're made. And when you see the terms of like leading by example and things like that, there's something in every man that says, "Hey, I want to be like that person." Well, it doesn't just automatically happen. There's a lot of internal drive that you can sit there and say, but there's a lot of also study, your own kind of studying. You can read books, you can watch movies, you can do things like that, but you also have to interact and actually go out there and find someone that is emulating the kind of leadership style that either you want to have or just sort of naturally works for the situation that you find yourself in. And then once you find that person, and sometimes it finds you, it's not,
yes.
Sometimes you have that, like, "Hey, I'm going to go out and look for a mentor." And sometimes there's programs that set up people for good mentorship, but sometimes it just sort of naturally happens. But you have to be open to this situation and kind of having an open eye and a curious mind to say, okay, like, hey, and also a humbleness to say, "Hey, I might need some help here," or "I have an interest in becoming something better." When those things start to align, and how do you get that? We could talk about how do you align that sort of thing. But that's where the magic starts to happen. But it is very cliche, but sometimes cliches are very accurate. No leader is just born. They are made by looking through direct mentorship, following people we stand on the shoulder of giants, and that is mentorship in a nutshell.
Dude, I love how you put that. Sometimes you can find a mentor and sometimes they just find you. I think about my first mentor, and I wasn't looking for a mentor. I was in my late 20s. I had had a business for a couple of years. I was looking for a commercial insurance policy, and I got so much more than an insurance policy the day that I called a guy and said, "Will you sell this insurance policy to me?" We meet for coffee. And this man, Joe Stone, who has become just a critical figure in my life story, showed up. And this is a guy that was a couple decades ahead of me, and what he saw in me, I don't know, I didn't probably see in myself, but clearly he saw a man who was young, needing some mentorship. I didn't even know how to ask him to be a mentor. I didn't even know I should. But this man said, "Hey, why don't you walk the golf course with me?" And he walked the golf course Saturdays early. I didn't get up. Saturdays, I would sleep till like noon. And he said, "Meet me at the golf course at 6 a.m." And we weren't playing golf. We were just going to take a walk. And so from after the first day that I walked the golf course with him, I never missed a Saturday while we were doing it because I needed him speaking into my life. And I just thank God that God sent the man, and the man had the courage to call me out to say, "Hey, young man, walk with me." Because I didn't have the humility to ask him for help, nor did I think I needed it, but I sure did. And it was began my journey to be open and new. Man, I need other men who are ahead of me in life to be able to show me the way.
Yeah. I think, and I heard something in that you didn't say, but I heard your commitment. That was you. So and I'm not sure where, we could really, peel the onion and kind of dissect that, but your commitment, and you said, "Hey, this is really good for me." That's a very important decision that people have to make is, okay, I'm going to, everybody wants to have a better life, and I want to do this and I want to do that. But it starts with, okay, how do you put your plan into action? It's commitment. I heard that when you said that.
No doubt. And what I also learned through that is, being mentored by somebody, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
There's some mentors you need to pay, and with your money, some of them you need to pay with your time. But when you ask someone to help you, there's no terms on your end. It's whatever they say, you do. And if you're not willing to do it, then they ain't your mentor. But when someone's willing to show you the ropes, if they say, "Meet me at 6," if they say, "Meet me at 4," if they say, "Come to this workout," if they say it costs $5,000, it doesn't matter. They have the terms. And if you want what they have, you just got to say yes and trust that they're going to lead you to a place that you've never been before.
Not to, yeah, and I'm gonna kind of amplify that based off of what Red used the term of a whetstone, but if you think about when you do sharpen a knife, what happens to the blade? You're actually removing metal from a blade. You're also doing some alignments and things like that, but ultimately, yes, you are going to start losing a little bit of that blade every single time. And I think there's something poetic and you're just like you said, there is alignment in his analogy in what happens in real life.
Because I remember last year you told a story, and maybe you told it multiple times, and I could probably hear you tell it 10 more, about a really high-powered colonel, I think, that you worked under. And so for those of you that don't know, Goose, long military career in the Navy, Navy pilot, trained Navy pilots, but you had a season where you were serving a big dog. And you said that was pivotal in your career. I'd love you to share a little bit of that story with our listeners.
Sure. And I know which one you're talking about. And for some reason, I'm actually going back to something. I'll kind of tell you, like it is an ever-going process, and there are multiple mentors in different phases of life.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. That was an Army colonel that in that phase, like I was getting ready to go be a commanding officer, and he kind of really did a good job of sort of, taking me down on a little notch in a funny sort of Army way. But he also gave me a lot of mentorship. But the one that sort of comes to my mind right now is when I was a real young, brand new pilot, I say brand new pilot in the Navy. I've been flying for 3 or 4 years, but I had just gotten to my first squadron of like actual operational, like we were going to go out into combat. And I had 2 senior pilots that were one guy's name, his call sign was Thumper, like the rabbit, and the other was Ned. And I think it was a really interesting kind of opportunity because I actually had 2 mentors, and they both had different ways of doing things. And they both had ways that as a junior pilot, I could look and say like, wow, I really like the way this pilot flies this way, but I like the way that pilot flies the airplane this way, and kind of see how things would work and start gleaning habit patterns, that really, because ultimately, like, especially in aviation, but even in life, like your habits are everything.
Yes. That's
and
right.
so watching how they interacted, and what, one pilot, he was extremely good at instructing. He had been a former, aircraft instructor, but he wasn't like, he was more of a do what I say, not what I do. So, and that happens. Versus the other guy, he was a natural pilot. He struggled a little bit with the instruction, but just by watching him fly the airplane, like he didn't have to say a word. He just flew, and all of us were like, that is the way to fly this airplane. And so having both of those things kind of come together and both of them sort of guide me as I started making decisions. And frankly, they were pretty blunt. They were like, I was going to go down this path. And both of them were like, that's a waste of your talent. You need to go this way and start and become a flight instructor and teach what we have taught you to the next generation. And I think that, teaching, mentorship, these words, they technically mean different things, but man, they can really kind of come together. And that's, there's a lot of that shift from being mentored to the mentee. It can happen pretty fast, but it's really fun when that happens.
Wow. I tell you, I just got to think out loud a little bit here. So I've heard you tell a lot of stories. I know you as a good leader, just how you shared in our F3 community, the stories you told. I just started thinking, you start to really learn more about a man when you learn about where they came from and who are the men before them, who mentored them, who are they a student of. And the more you share about those mentors, I'm just getting more layers of your onion peeled back to be like, now I can see how Goose became Goose. How amazing of a season that you had the teacher and the doer. You had someone teaching you textbook, but also showing you real life, and to be able to be exposed to the genius of both of those at one time. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was really cool. Like I said, well, the one guy, he kind of every once in a while he'd be like, "Don't do what I'm about to do," but he was like, "Let me show you why this is happening the way it is," and we'd be like, "Huh?" But we were like, "That guy knows the airplane better than anybody we know." Over here was a guy that he was a little bit more quiet, a little bit more reserved, but he flew the airplane so smoothly that we were like, man, if we took both of those pilots and jammed it together, that's who we wanted to be. I don't think I had that conscious decision, but I think maybe subconsciously I was like, maybe that's me. Let me take both of those things and kind of, take the goods, take the bads, and learn from that. And even now, I've been teaching again since January, and this whole, it doesn't stop. Like 20 years in the Navy, and I am back as being mentored again by people ahead of me, and I'm 44, it never stops. And and now it happens on a daily basis now. That's why life is incredible right now, that I go into work and I talk to the people ahead of me, my coworkers, but technically they're senior to me. And I'm like, hey, I got this lesson I'm trying to do. What have y'all done? What are some gotchas? And they sit there and tell me, and I'm like, okay. And I take my own time to kind of create my own lesson plan. And then 30 minutes later, I'm in the simulator, teaching the next, set of students, and doing that kind of mentorship and teaching and doing all the things like that. And like I said, I never thought this would have ever happened. And I never had this vision. And frankly, it's a gift from God, is how I see it. But it really, like every day is the ebb and flow of going from being mentored to the mentee really fast. And it's really fun. And I've noticed a couple things, the really cool things about, as a man, what happens when you turn around and become the mentee. And we can talk about that here in a second.
Yeah, well, I want to get there for sure. It's interesting. I just hope everybody caught that. So, Goose has a career of being mentored, became the pilot he is today because of the mentorship of other men who made him a pilot of the quality that now he can mentor men the way that he's mentored. But you're not stopping there. Now you realize it's not so much how to pilot that you need to know, it's how to instruct. And so here you are seeking out, saying, I know how to pilot, but now I need other instructors to mentor me in being a more effective instructor so I can pass on the wisdom that I have in an effective way that impacts the next generation. I love that flow of just the energy, the love, the wisdom flowing up and down through your life, from above all the way through those different areas. It's got to be really kind of a fulfilling season right now.
It is. And I actually heard, I got this from a podcast, and I'll get you the name later, but the guy said there is like, sometimes if you're a little bit lost or you're not really sure what to do, is go teach. And you'll get a lot of satisfaction, because you're taking somebody like we say is like, hey, I'm taking a raw person, a lump of clay, and shaping them into who actually they want to be. It's not who I want them to be. There's a little bit of me, but like, I'm like, hey, these are my, for aviation, there are some standards here, but ultimately it's, who do you want to be? Okay, let me show you how to do that. I think when it comes to being a mentee, as a person who is providing mentorship to somebody, it automatically raises your level, your game.
No doubt.
You have to raise your, and because that's where all these things of, well, do as I say, not as I do, that doesn't work.
Mm-mm.
Unless you can really do a really a heavy justification of being like, okay, I did this, but I would actually recommend you not do that because of this, that, and the other. But I have definitely found that being put into this new situation, like I go to my mentors because I'm like, I need to up my game. I can't stand in front of a student and not have the answer. I'm not going to have every answer, but I definitely want to have some credibility. And that we can talk about some words like
Yeah.
approachability, humbleness, and credibility when it comes to mentor mentee relationships.
Yeah. Man, you got me thinking. I remember it was, oh, I don't know, about a decade ago, I had a younger man come up to me and ask, would you read the Bible with me? And
Mm-hmm.
I said yes. And then that quickly became a mentor mentee relationship. And then a couple other guys caught wind and they joined. And I know I got more out of that season, that 5 year period than they did, because to your point, I realized, if I'm going to teach this stuff, I've got to be living it. And
Yep.
I've got to take my game to another level, because it's not okay for me to just pontificate out of opinion. I've got to be able to show real world results that what I'm saying, works. And I probably grew so much having had someone to pour into, because I knew I had to hold myself to that standard. And I think that's a really meaningful thing that I hope our packs would know. So many of the men listening are in a place in life where they're ready to mentor other people, that they
Yeah.
have wisdom to share, and
Yeah.
know that one, it will take your personal growth to another level. But the thing you got to realize is, and I want you to now comment on this, is that when you decide to mentor someone, the responsibility is pretty great,
Absolutely.
because these people are going to make decisions that affect their life based on your instruction and your wisdom. And so then you got to ask yourself, should they?
Yeah.
Should people really listen to what I'm saying here? Should they really apply what I'm about to say? And have I really lived this enough to know that if they do this, that this will work?
Yeah. I think, and maybe I love how you said that. My brain goes to something of maybe this is at my point or my age, and I think as you get older, you get wisdom, but you usually get wisdom through failure.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be. I think maybe I don't know if that's because we're also parents, but
Yeah.
also just again that kind of phase of you're like, look, the things that there's a couple of parallels. Like we say things to our kids, and you're like, don't do that, and they don't listen. But you're like, look, it's because first I either made that mistake when I was your age,
Mm-hmm.
or like there is some, there's some you can really get hurt, or we've seen historical
Mm-hmm.
examples of you getting really hurt doing that. But then there's the same parallel, which is you and I have talked about again aviation. We write our manuals for the airplanes. They're written in blood. They're written. We change
Wow.
procedures because of mistakes.
Gosh.
And so I think that there's one thing when you're like, hey, this is if you're going to give mentorship or advice. There's all sorts of cliches and phrases and quotes about advice. But there is something a little bit more powerful about someone that's like, don't do that. And here's because I did it when I was your age, and it wrecked me, and it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but then it turned into the best thing that's ever happened to me. Those kind of phrases, those are the kind of things that I listen for, is be like, hey, like we all make mistakes, and life throws things that you just can't expect or plan for. But those are the kind of things that I listen for in terms of like, okay, well, I'm still alive after flying in 20 years because the people ahead of me, they turned around and they were like, look, don't do this because if you're not careful, it'll kill you. Those are the words that I have heard a bunch of times, and I was like, you listen to that kind of stuff. I think
Yeah.
I don't know if there's it's a little bit more difficult for the ambition of being like, hey, this is what I would do if I wanted to have a better career, a better family. I think there's something different, at least in my brain, about versus the negative. And I think that's negative versus positive. And I think that might be a rabbit hole for another day, but maybe that's where we are in our life, that kind of midlife level of being like, okay, how do I just limit the damage and avoid as many mistakes as I can versus when I'm 25 and I can accept more risk and kind of go out there and do that. I don't know. That I'd have to pull the string on that one a little bit more.
Yeah. So how have you, you told some great stories of, how being mentored made you into a better leader. And you've touched on how being a mentor has helped you, but
Mhm.
would love you to challenge maybe the PACs who've never actually mentored anybody or been a mentor, help encourage them to understand why is that important that they find someone to pour into, and what's that done for you as a man, you as a leader, you as a professional, like by having someone directly that you are able to really pour into and
Sure.
mentor.
My brain right now, you saying that is, I think if you look at your own situation, we have a tendency to either not catastrophize ourselves, but be like, wow, this is like really like, look at this thing, look at my situation right now. It can't possibly get worse. And I'll give you like when we go to the circle of trust and we start opening up and learning about other people, you're like, whoa, I thought my situation, this might sound kind of bad, but you're like, my problems don't sound all that bad all of a sudden. Um, I don't know if that's humility, but I think it's something like that. I think when you're like, hey, I'm gonna start giving advice. Um, there's definitely a humbleness that comes to you, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how that, again, how that emotion or that feeling or whatever. But when you decide you're going to be like, and there's no, again, sometimes it just sort of naturally happens. All of a sudden, you start talking to some kid, and you're like, wow, I kind of gave them some good advice. Um, I guess advice is like those one-off sort of things, like, hey, I'm going to give you some advice, and maybe I'll never
Yeah.
see you again. But mentorship becomes a relationship, and
Yes.
so when you do that, there's three words that I wrote down that says, okay, like, hey, if I'm going to mentorship, things that I need to provide or need to recognize, I need to take a like conscious step to think about these things, which is I need to be approachable. If
Good.
I'm, yeah, so if I'm a
Yeah.
mentor and this person does
Yeah.
not feel comfortable coming to me, um,
Right.
that's open communication. So approachability is them coming to me and be like, hey, I need some help, which is a very hard thing for a man to say.
Yep.
I need some help, or I'm not sure how to do this, or like they're going to be vulnerable, and you need to recognize when you hear those words. That's a very critical moment of if you handle it well, that relationship will flourish. If you handle it poorly, that could be the end of the mentorship. Humbleness is that is as a mentee. Let's see, I'm the mentor.
Yep.
When I mentor somebody, I have to be humble and be like, I have made some mistakes,
Yeah.
and let me help you not do those things.
Yes.
That's a really powerful thing, and it takes a lot of courage, frankly, on as a mentor to be like, yep, I have messed this up so many times, and boy, if you can avoid this mistake, that would be fantastic. Not conversely, but there's also a level of credibility. So it's weird because I can sit there and say like, hey, I've made a mistake 1,000 times. I've failed so many times, but I still have a level of credibility. Like if I failed
Yeah.
and
Right.
I'm nothing, like the person that's like they're gonna be like, well, why should I come and talk to this person? Like they don't know what that's not who I want to be, or they have not reached a level that I want to get to. And so from aviation, like approachability, I had a couple of really great bosses that they were like, "Yep, come on in. Like, you can come and tell me whatever's going on." They seemed humble enough to understand that aviation is a really dangerous place, and we need humble aviators are the ones that are going to stay alive. But then also as a junior pilot looking to the senior people, I was like, they really got their stuff squared away. They are really good sticks. They're really good pilots. They make fantastic decisions in the airplane. How do I do that? Like, how do I? That credibility from them. That as when you take on the role as a mentor, you have to be like, okay, my credibility is going to be possibly questioned, but it's definitely going to be put under a microscope. Now I got to start raising my game.
Mm. I can't wait to go back and listen to this and take the notes. I mean, each one of these being an effective mentee and being an effective mentor. I love this, the three-prong approach to each of them. And I hope that the PACs are taking notes for this. I know for me, the only thing I would add to what you're saying is just the gratification I've had mentoring other men. When you take the time, it's going to cost you as a mentor. It is.
Absolutely.
You got to be available. You're going to get calls you didn't expect. You're going to spend time that you don't think that you have, but it's gratifying. And it's not just because people take notes when you speak. It's when they come back with the stories that said, I've been working on this thing you were talking about and I got a raise, or my wife and I are on better terms, or we decided to have another baby, or whatever the deal is. Like, it's really gratifying when the people that you invest in, when those investments start to return into their lives, and then you see those results just continue to carry forward. So I want us to go ahead and land this plane, to tie a bow and on this conversation. And let's just challenge our packs. If you can give them a challenge just to take this, I think there's probably plenty of men, as we said before, who maybe don't have someone they're pouring into and maybe find themselves without a mentor, that we just challenge that this be one of those meaningful conversations that they start to think, how can I journey into this? So what kind of encouragement would you give to someone who's listening to this thinking, I think I need more of that in my life?
Yeah, I can almost pinpoint the day that I did it when I was down in Wake Forest. That one day, it takes a little bit of extra vulnerability as a guy.
Yeah.
Go up and have that, and do it quietly, like do it on the side, but kind of grab somebody and be a little bit vulnerable and just be like, hey, I kind of see that you're doing this, and I kind of like how you're doing that. Like, or I kind of want the marriage that you seem to have with your wife, or you seem to be really good with money. Like, how do I, do you mind just, can I buy you a cup of coffee, and can I spend some time with you? That is all it takes. And the momentum starts. And then again, to your point, then you got to say, okay, we've had the initiation of movement. Now we need to maintain, you got to keep showing up. Just like you're when you were walking the golf course, you got to show up and be committed to that thing and saying, okay, this is a thing. And that's what F3, that's the beauty of it, is we all get together, but we also demonstrate commitment on a daily basis. Get up at 5:30 in the morning and go out there and do it. But yeah, that is how you initiate from I am seeking mentorship. Go up to somebody, pull them aside, be a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah, love it. And I would say, probably not each mentor is going to be able to mentor you in all areas of your life. You may have in this season, you may need a money mentor. This season, you may need a marriage mentor. This season, you may need a mentor in your profession. So don't worry if that person doesn't have everything figured out in all arenas. You know what you really need help with right now. Be available to them. And then, just like you say, be approachable to the other men. I think back, for sure, the most fulfilling seasons of my life is when I had a strong mentor in my life, and I had people that I could pour that into, and it just makes that flow really gratifying, and it feels like there's a real alignment in your life and when that's going on. So Pax, you guys are full of wisdom. You're full of heart and passion and compassion. And I challenge you to be available to the younger men who see the good that you're doing and want more of your time. And I challenge you to go find the men that are in the places that you're trying to get to and seek them out. And most people, they want to help. So don't be afraid, as Goose said, to be vulnerable, to humble yourself, to ask for help, because most people are really looking for someone that they can give back to.
Absolutely.
Goose.
I challenge you. There's also don't be surprised if every once in a while a 55, 65, 75-year-old might look for a little mentorship from a younger guy too. That happens every once in a while. So.
Absolutely. Goose, I'm so glad that we made this work. I'm so glad that the sheet music put our notes on the same page for this episode. I guarantee you, I'm going to be texting you again on through the years. There's so much wisdom that you have to share with us that we want to get more of that on this. So be looking for a text from me for other chapters, and thanks for joining us for this week on the F3 podcast.
Absolutely, Money Pit. It's a pleasure as always, and I will always be available for you and the guys down there, all right?
Awesome. Great. We'll see you at the Q Source table.
All right, now.
Yeah.